going to be doing a book recommendations. As we all know, Valentine's Day is coming up. Valentine's Day is my favorite holiday. I love all holidays, if you guys couldn't tell from like the past few months, but Valentine's Day is one of my favorite holidays. You would think I would be bitter because I've never had a Valentine's before, but I am a hopeless romantic. Okay, so before we start the video, this video is actually sponsored by Likewise, and I want to thank them so much. If you guys know me, then you know that I'm always reading, but one big issue I always have is that when I finish a book, I never know what to pick up next, and Likewise is the perfect app for that. Likewise is the best app to discover and share recommendations for books, movies, TV shows, and more. You can always find something new to read and watch on the app. One thing I love is, besides reading, is also watching TV and watching movies. I love TV shows and movies just as much as I love books, and I actually found this show on there called Cobra Kai, and I'm really excited to start that. Powered by the combination of smart technology and real people giving real recommendations, Likewise app will give you the best personalized recommendations as possible. Likewise has a feature called Today where you can just scroll through it and you can say if you've seen it, you can save it, or you can also just swipe to the side. And so I'm on here like a lot, so seen it. Whoops, actually haven't seen that. And then once you've seen it, you can say whether you just liked it or liked it. And then you can also find a book, movie, or TV show that you want to save for later, and then go to save. So here's some of my saved. I have Rebecca, Queen's Gambit, The Great, Cobra Kai, as I brought up earlier. I also have books like To Sleep in the Sea of Stars, Soul. And when you do saves, you can also just select it. I personally just go under all of them because I basically take in media in all forms, so I personally just go through all. But you can always go to TV. You can either pick TV shows, movies, or books. And then with lists, you can easily organize and share all of your favorite books using Likewise list feature. So with the list feature, I have like a TBR, and on here I have like Beach Read, The Wife Upstairs, The Duke and I, and Magic Lessons. You can also ask, so if you need some recommendations from Likewise, you can post an ask on Likewise and quickly receive recommendations. And you can do likes, asks, and lists all on pressing post. And then so I will go to ask, and then I will do books, and then I would just ask a question, and then people can comment their opinions. You can also buy books straight from the app. And so if you want to download Likewise, I will leave a link to it in the description. The link will be at the top of the description. The app is 100% free, and you guys can follow me on there if you want, because y'all know I watch like the best shows and read the best books. And I just want to thank Likewise one more time for sponsoring this video, and we're gonna get into the video now. So I'm going to be recommending you guys some enemies to lovers romance books, because who doesn't love enemies to lovers? Like, that is the genre, you know? So I'm gonna give you some enemies to lovers recommendations, and they're gonna be split up into two different parts. There's gonna be fantasy and romance, because I read a lot of genres, so I can bring a lot to the table. So the first book we're gonna talk about is The Cruel Prince. Now, if you didn't know, which you should, is The Cruel Prince is one of my all-time favorite books ever. It's actually called the Folk of the Air series, but like literally no one ever calls it that. So it's called the Folk of the Air series, and there are 3 books and 2 novellas. There's one actual physical novella, and then there's like an ebook novella. So the main 3 books are about Drew Duarte, and she is a human, and she is taken from the human world and put into the fairy world because her sister is actually half human, half fae. So she, from a young age, is living in this fae world, and they do not like humans. I also have a video recommendations of fae books because I think I'm a fairy. I live like one. So I love fairies. I love fairy books, fairy things. I love it. So she is set to live in this fairy world, and they do not like humans. So they are very mean to her. They pick on her. They bully her. And then she is set to be a knight by one of the fairy princes, and a lot of things go down. Now, if you don't like the first book, that is completely understandable. A lot of people didn't, but I highly, highly, highly recommend reading the second book. If you finish the book and you're like, oh, I don't understand why this book is so hyped, I honestly suggest going on to the sequel. The next book I want to talk about is An Enchantment of Ravens and Sorcery of Thorns. Enchantment of Ravens is also a fairy book, and Enchantment of Ravens and Sorcery of Thorns are not books in a series. They are both standalone books by the same author, Margaret Rogerson. I love her books. I love her covers. She is such a great writer. These stories are so short and so simple. Enchantment of Ravens is about this girl who lives in a human world, and she's a painter, and this fairy asks her to paint a picture, and she accidentally paints sorrow in his eye, which is a big no-no because they aren't supposed to like have emotions. So she is whisked away on trial, and on their way to trial she ends up falling in love with the fairy. Sorcery of Thorns is about this girl who's a librarian, and she is accused of killing one of her friends, and now she's also kind of like put on trial, and she meets Nathan and Silas, and it's such a good book. I love Sorcery of Thorns. I love both of them. Highly recommend. The next book is Pestilence, and this book is basically a Pestilence is it's like a 4 horsemen of the apocalypse type of book. I don't really know if I recommend this book right now. I personally read it. It's a pandemic book. I personally read it during the pandemic because like I was fine, but like I know it might cause a lot of stress and anxiety for a few people, so I wouldn't suggest if that's not your kind of thing. But this book is about the 4 horsemen of apocalypse, and they are causing the pandemic, and the world is ending, and the main character is a firefighter, and she literally draws the short end of a stick where she has to go and try to kill Pestilence. And she tries to kill him. She thinks she does. He jumps up. He kidnaps her. And now they are just traveling, and he has to like be a horseman. So she is forced to be with him while that happens. And it is a fantasy romance book. And I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. So if you are into like romance and fantasy romance, I suggest it. Then I also have Shatter Me, which Shatter Me isn't my favorite series ever. I read the entire series except the last book, because this is before the last book came out. So I read the entire series in about 2 days, all 5 books in 2 days, and no novellas too. There's like 80 novellas. I read everything in 2 days, so it's such an easy book to binge read. This book is basically about this girl named Juliet who is in prison, and she basically, anyone she touches she can kill. She has a lethal touch, and she's in prison. And then you meet Warner. Everyone loves Warner. I'm kind of like, I'm like don't care about him. Like I think they're cute. I don't care about, it's not that I don't care, it's just like meh. But I highly suggest it if you want something that's fun, quick to read, and easy. Give it a try. The next book I have is Stalking Jack the Ripper. I read this series last year. I never finished the last book, but I loved Stalking Jack the Ripper. Now let me tell you, the author's writing is very hit or miss for most people. Mostly miss. The author does not have the best writing ever, but if you don't care about the writing, if you just want to read about good banter and good romance, I highly suggest checking her out. If you are a romance lover like me, which is why I'm putting this in the video, I highly suggest checking out Stalking Jack the Ripper and her other most recent book, because I personally like them, but a lot of people don't, and I understand why. I don't blame them. But Stalking Jack the Ripper is basically about this girl, and her name is Audrey Rose, and she wants to be a mortician. And it's not really like ladylike because it's historical, and basically it's not very ladylike to want to be a mortician. So she's working with her uncle, and it's 4 different books, and they have like different cases in each book, and it's just a really fun YA series, and the romance in the book is really, really good. I love Thomas Cresswell. Like, he is to die for. He is so charming, great banter. I love him. The next book is Daily Education. Y'all know I read this last year. One of my favorite books of all time. This is a dark academia book, and it's about the character Elle, who is half Indian, half English, and she is in this school called the School of Ants, where there are no teachers and no days off, and there is evil lurking around every single corner. And so she ends up getting involved with this boy named Orion because he keeps saving her life, kind of to one up her, and she's not messing with it. And then there's like this plot twist at the end, and personally I really enjoyed the book and I highly suggest it. And then I also have Dark Fever, which is another fae book, and this one is very underrated. This is a paranormal, this is like more so of a very like paranormal romance. Like if you read paranormal romance you'll understand what I mean. But yeah, so this book is about this girl, and her sister dies in Dublin, and she ends up getting this call from her sister, like her sister begging for her help, and then she finds out her sister is dead like the next few minutes. And so she flies to Dublin to figure out what happens. I personally really enjoyed the books. I didn't finish the last one, but I binge read like all 4. I read them all in like 1 day. And then there's Kingdom of the Wicked, which is also by the same author, Carrie Maniscal, who wrote Stalking Jack the Ripper, Kingdom of the Wicked is a book about this girl who is a witch, and her sister ends up dying, and she sees one of the princes, and he's like the Prince of Wrath. They're all based off the 7 deadly sins, and she sees him like standing over her body drinking blood, so she's like, what the hell, you just killed my sister. And she summons him again, and he has to help her find out who really did it once they figure out that she didn't do it. And then we have From Blood and Ash, which I talk about all the time. It's one of my beloved favorite series, one of my favorite series of all time. This book is about the main character named Poppy, and she is a maiden, and a maiden is basically someone who is going to help everyone ascend. She is seen as like their prize possession. She has to be kept with the veil. She has to be kept safe at all times. She has to have a bodyguard. She cannot wander off. And in the start of the book, she ends up wandering off into this tavern where she ends up kissing this guy who doesn't know that it's her. And then she ends up seeing him again in the book. It has like a bunch of tea. It has like, it's just so good. Such good romance. Such good banter. Amazing. And then we also have A Deal with the Elf King, which I didn't really love. It was a 3-star book. But if you want to read a book that's like, sometimes you just need to read those books that you know you aren't gonna like love. Because I gave this book 3 stars, doesn't mean you'll also give it 3 stars, so you might really enjoy it. But this book is basically about this girl, and she lives in this like fantasy world, and every year they go and take a human to be their queen, they being the elves. And so she is picked to be the elves and queen. It was a fun book to read. I just kind of got bored at a certain point, but that's just me. And then I also have Bone Crusher's Moon, which I recently read, and I love this book. First of all, the romance of the book makes so much sense to me. Bone Crusher's Moon essentially follows 3 different characters, and there's just 2 characters, and in this fantasy world, live with just women. And once you become a certain age, you have to mate with the guy. He has to impregnate you, and then you have to kill him. And then this one guy whose father ends up being killed by these women, he comes and he's like, I'm just gonna kill this person. So he goes to kill the girl, and then he ends up kidnapping her, and they have like this little adventure. And the enemies to lovers romance makes perfect sense to me. A lot of people didn't get it, but I mean, did you read the same book? It makes so much sense. And now we're gonna go into romance. So the first book I have is Her Royal Highness, and this is a sapphic book. This book is enemies to lovers, but at the same time it's kind of not. Like, they kind of switch. And this book is about this girl, and she is going to a boarding school in Scotland, and her roommate ends up being the princess of Scotland. And the princess is like so mean to her, and the main character's like, what the heck, I will not take this. And so they kind of have like this enemies thing, but they end up becoming friends really quickly. But I still thought it was like a pretty good book to read, and it was still technically enemies to lovers. So then I have literally any Penelope Douglas book. I would suggest you start off with Punk 57. Birthday Girl isn't really enemies to lovers, so I probably won't say that one. Corrupt, Credence is like, I would suggest for this video Punk 57, but you could also read anyone. Corrupt and Credence are my favorite. I like Punk 57, it was good. Also Bully was really good. Next book is Kiss Thief, and this is by LJ Shin. This is about this girl who is like a part of this mob life, and her dad is basically trying to marry her off. Okay, so they have this mob life, and she wants to go to college, get an education, do all this stuff, but in like their world, it's not a fantasy or anything, this is set in real life, but in their world, like, that's just not something women do. And so she goes to this ball, she's dancing with the senator, and she sees him and she hates him. I hate when books do that, but why they end up hating each other in the long run makes sense. But it gets better, so it's not just like a little trash enemies lover. But basically, she's dancing with this guy, and she tells him how their family has this tradition of like, once you open this box, it's that you're gonna have a kiss on this night. And so to be evil, the guy kisses her that night, and then the next day he tells her dad, like, I want an arranged marriage with her, because her dad is like in some deep shit. So she's like, I want an arranged marriage with her. So they have this arranged marriage, and that's why she ends up hating him. But it was like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, kind of. And then also I want to say Paper Princess. I loved Paper Princess. This one is about this girl who is a stripper, and one day this guy comes to find her, and he's like, come live with me, I knew your dad. And so she goes to live with him, and he's super rich, and he has a bunch of sons, and all the sons hate her because they think that she shouldn't steal their money. and it's a bunch of drama. Oh my gosh, so much drama. Literally, I've only read 2 books and I can tell you so much that happened in just those 2 books. I still have to finish the series. Then I also have Fake It Till You Break It, which is a little girl who loves to dance, and this guy who's a football player, and she has a crush on a guy, not the same guy, the main love interest. She's got a crush on a different guy who's on the football team, and the love interest and the guy both hate each other. So the love interest proposes an idea to fake date so that they can make the other guy jealous, even though he has a secret agenda. And I love that plot line when like a guy is like, yeah, let's secretly date, even though like you're like, why would you just propose the idea? Like, what do you have planned here? And so I personally, and then I have The Secret Girl, which I read last year and I really loved it. And this one is about this girl. Basically, like, she's the man. It's about this girl who's going to this boarding school, and this is all boys boarding school, and she's like dressing up as a guy, and she ends up coming across the like guys who like run the school, and they're like the richest, and they have to I'm not rushing talking so fast, and so they automatically hate her because she's such an asshole to them. And even though they're popular, they're really not that mean to her until she starts pushing their buttons. But to their knowledge, she's a guy, so like it's not like wrong in their mind. But then like when you're reading it from her perspective, you're like, hey, that's kind of messed up. They don't even know. Then there's also Cruel Prince and Ruthless Night by A. Jade. Not to be confused with The Cruel Prince, but Cruel Prince is a story about this girl who childhood friends to enemies to lovers book, basically, where she grew up with this guy and then she moved away and she moves back and he's suddenly really mean to her and she has no idea why, and you slowly find out. That was a pretty decent book. But Ruthless Night, that was a book. These guys are also Indian, which I always forget to mention, but it's like a big part of their characters as well. So Ruthless Night follows the brother of the guy in the main story and then the best friend of the girl in the main story. And so I just love when in like romance books you can see a romance like cooking up like from like the main characters, even though they're side characters, and like when you read their books, like they're always like better than the first books. I don't know why authors do that to themselves. And then we have The Villain, which is right here. I would put The Hunter on there. That's Enemies to Lovers as well, but I like The Villain more. And then there's like Hades and Persephone retelling. And this book is about this girl whose husband basically needed a bunch of money, took it from like these thugs, and ran away, and now she has to pay them off, and her friends just happen to be really rich, so she goes to the one she's not closest with, and then they end up proposing this idea where she has to have his kids and marry him. It's just really good. It's like one of the best like LJ Shin books ever, like, to be honest. And then I have The Wall of Winnipeg in Me, which is a Mariana Zapata book, which if you are going to read this, I am sending you my condolences, because Mariana Zapata, if you like slow burn, that is something that you're gonna get. This is more so a enemies to friends to lovers book, because this is about this girl who worked for this guy, and she was just like, he would never like look at her, he would never say anything to her, he never knew anything about her. So she's like, why do I want to work for this guy? Like, I'm gonna quit. So she quits, and then he proposes this idea that they get fake married, and that was really good. It was so long, such slow burn. If you are, like I said, if you are really into slow burn, Mariana Zapata is the one for you. And I also have Get a Life Chloe Brown, which, like, if you don't know what that is about, where have you been? The Unhoneymooners, which if you don't know what that is about, where have you been? And then A Lesson in Thorns, which is a poly book, which y'all know. If you guys didn't know, I'm really into like poly books, even though there's like 4 probably. But this is a poly book about these kids who all hung out in this mansion when they were younger, so they reunite and things get interesting. And then we also have You Deserve Each Other, which I read recently last year, and it's about this couple. They're already engaged and they're kind of sick of each other, so they kind of have this bet on whoever calls off the wedding first has to pay off the wedding, and so neither of them want to do it, so they're both like basically being assholes to each other for fun. That is it for this video. I hope that you liked it. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and comment down below a spider emoji. Why did I just say that? I hate spiders, but yes, it's the quickest one that came into my mind. So comment down a spider emoji, and I'll see you guys in my next video.